Mom. I'm right here. Everything is gonna be fine.
I'm so scared, honey. Don't leave me.
We need suction ready now. Get the large bore tubing hooked up.
Tubing is set. Charging the cautery.
We need more suction here.
Blood pressure is dropping slightly.
Forceps ready, doctor.
Margaret Thompson, 68, lay on the examination bed in Cleveland, Ohio, her left forearm swollen so severely that the skin looked shiny and stretched. A single insect bite, one she had ignored for days, now throbbed with a strange, unnatural rhythm. Her husband Rob, 72, stood at her side gripping her cold fingers. Her son Michael, 35, looked furious and terrified. Her daughter Emily, 32, could barely keep from crying. The doctor examined the swollen area with tense concentration. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to release a bit of pressure. Just a small incision." Margaret nodded weakly. The doctor made the cut. What happened next froze the entire room. The skin over the bite lifted from the inside, as though something pushed upward in response. A faint ripple traveled beneath the surface, moving against the incision line. Emily gasped. Mom, what is that?" From the tiny opening, a thin translucent filament slowly slipped outward. It wasn't pus. It wasn't fluid. It looked structured, like something that had been forming inside her arm. Rob's eyes widened. "Doctor, that isn't normal, is it?" The doctor stepped back, voice trembling. "No, it's not. And whatever this is, it's still active." Margaret felt tears gather as her arm twitched. She whispered, "What's happening to me?" And no one in the room had an answer. The moment the strange filament slid from Margaret's arm, the doctor's voice snapped into urgency. "Get her to trauma room 4, now." 2 nurses rushed in, unlocking the bed breaks and pulling Margaret toward the hallway. Her swollen arm twitched again, sending a jolt of pain through her entire body. "Rob," she cried softly, her voice unsteady. Her husband hurried beside her, clutching her other hand. "I'm right here, sweetheart. I'm not leaving." Emily followed close behind, tears streaking her cheeks. Michael stormed beside them, anger and fear colliding in his chest. "This should have been checked days ago. Mom, why didn't you tell us it was this bad?" Margaret tried to speak, but her breath caught. The swelling was beginning to reach her elbow. Inside the ER room, alarms sounded as nurses hooked her to monitors. A pulse reading spiked erratically. Her oxygen dipped. "Her swelling is moving upward," one nurse said, panic rising in her voice. Another nurse examined the bite area, whispering, "And there's internal movement. Would I guess that?" Michael slammed his palm against the counter. "Someone do something." Rob leaned over his wife, brushing her forehead. "Stay with me, Margaret. Please." But Margaret's eyes were already fluttering, her body drifting between pain and confusion, as the ER team scrambled around her. As Margaret drifted in and out of consciousness, the beeping monitors around her faded into the background, and her mind slipped back 4 days earlier. It had been a quiet Tuesday morning in her small Cleveland backyard, birds chirping, sunlight warm on her shoulders. Gardening was the one thing that made her feel young again. She hummed softly while trimming her rose bushes, proud of how beautifully they bloomed this year. Then she felt it, a tiny sting on her left forearm. She brushed at it absent-mindedly. "Probably just a mosquito," she muttered. When she went inside, Rob noticed the small red bump. "You okay, Mags?" he asked, peeking over his newspaper. "Oh, it's nothing," she laughed lightly. "No reason to worry you over a silly bite." But by evening, the bump had grown slightly. She winced once, quietly, when no one was looking. Michael called that night, asking if she needed groceries. She didn't mention the swelling. Emily visited the next morning with her usual brightness. Still, Margaret pulled her sleeves down to hide the bite. She didn't want to burden anyone. Not her husband, not her kids. And that single decision was the beginning of everything that went wrong. The next morning, the bite had doubled in size. Margaret stood at the bathroom mirror, gently pressing around it, wincing at the heat radiating from her skin. That's when her neighbor, Mrs. Daly, knocked on the door with a basket of herbs. "Oh, honey, let me see that," she said, barging in with the confidence of someone who believed she knew everything. "It's nothing serious. My cousin had a bite like that. Just use this cream, natural, cheap, works for everything." Margaret hesitated. "It looks a bit strong." "Nonsense," Mrs. Daly insisted, shoving the jar into her hands. "You seniors fuss too much. Rub it in twice a day." Margaret didn't want to seem difficult, so she applied the cream later that afternoon. It burned instantly. That evening, Emily visited again and finally noticed her mom's discomfort. "Mom, please, we should see a doctor." Margaret forced a smile. "Sweetheart, it's just a bug bite. Don't worry." But when Michael dropped by after work, he saw the swelling through her sleeve. "Mom, this is not normal." Margaret pulled her arm away defensively. "I don't want you kids stressing over me." She tried to sound strong, but she was already starting to fear what she felt growing inside her arm. By the third day, the bite no longer looked like a bite. It had changed shape, no longer a circle, but a stretched, oval swelling that seemed to pull inward, as if something beneath the skin was tightening itself. Margaret woke up with a strange heaviness in her arm, the kind that made her fingers feel stiff and slow. She sat quietly at the kitchen table, trying to lift her coffee mug. A sudden sharp pain shot up to her elbow, making her gasp out loud. Rob looked over from the stove. "You hurting again?" "Margaret, tell me the truth." She shook her head quickly. "It's just arthritis. My arm's probably tired." But deep inside, she felt a faint fluttering, something she could not explain, like a tiny ripple beneath her skin. That afternoon, Emily called. Margaret tried to sound cheerful, but mid-conversation, the inside of her forearm tightened so suddenly she dropped the phone. Later that evening, while folding laundry, she felt it again. A small, sliding sensation traveling slowly up her arm. Her breath caught. She pressed her palm flat against the swollen area, whispering, "Please just go away." But whatever was happening inside her was only getting worse. Margaret lay completely still inside the CT scanner, her swollen arm elevated on a padded support. Her breathing was shaky, and every few seconds she winced as the deep, internal pressure pulsed again. Rob stood outside the glass window with Michael and Emily. None of them spoke. They just watched her helplessly. Two technicians leaned closer to the monitor as the first images appeared. Their eyebrows lifted simultaneously. "Do you see that?" one whispered. The other zoomed in on a cross-section of Margaret's forearm. A strange, oval-shaped pocket appeared just beneath the bite, thin, layered, and pushing inward toward the muscle. Emily clasped her hands over her mouth. "Oh my God!" Michael leaned closer. "What is that supposed to be?" "Infection doesn't look like that." The technician didn't answer. Instead, he called the attending physician over. The doctor studied the image quietly, then frowned. "Run a motion scan." The technician obeyed. Seconds later, they all froze. Inside the layered pocket, a faint shift occurred. A small, deliberate wriggle, like something responding to the pressure. The doctor whispered, almost to himself, "This isn't normal, and whatever is inside her arm, it's active." Margaret's eyes opened weakly. She saw their faces through the glass, and her fear deepened. While the doctors stepped out to consult with specialists, Margaret was moved to a quieter observation room. Her forearm throbbed with a steady, frightening pressure. Rob sat beside her, holding her cold hand, while Michael and Emily stayed near the foot of the bed. Emily noticed Margaret's handbag slightly open. Inside, she saw the small jar of cream, the one the neighbor had insisted on. She gently picked it up, reading the label. "Mom, what is this?" Margaret looked away, shame washing over her. Michael snatched the jar from Emily's hands. "This is some random cheap ointment. Where did you even get this? Why didn't you tell us you were using garbage like this on an insect bite?" Margaret's lips quivered. I didn't want to bother any of you. You all have your own lives. I thought it would go away." Emily crouched beside the bed, tears forming. "You're our mother. You don't get to hide pain from us." Rob's voice cracked as he squeezed her hand. "Mags, you scared me half to death tonight. I thought—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Margaret finally broke down. "I made a mistake. I'm so sorry." And for the first time, the family realized. This wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a moment of truth they had all been avoiding. The surgeon, Dr. Harris, entered the room with a folder in his hands and urgency in his voice. Margaret sat propped up on pillows, her swollen arm resting in a sling-like support. Rob, Michael, and Emily instantly straightened, bracing themselves. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, we need to operate," Dr. Harris began. "Whatever is inside her arm is not behaving like a normal infection, parasite, or allergic reaction. The CT shows a structured, layered sac pressing against nerves and a major vein." Emily's breath hitched. "A vein? Is she in danger?" Dr. Harris nodded grimly. "Yes. If that sac ruptures or spreads, it could send toxins into her bloodstream. We don't have time to wait." Margaret's voice trembled. What will you do?" "We'll open the pocket, remove the internal mass, and clean the surrounding tissue," he replied calmly. "It's delicate work, The sac is very close to critical structures. There is risk, but delaying would be far worse. Michael stepped forward, eyes glossy. So she could? If we wait, the doctor said carefully, she may not recover. Rob swallowed hard and reached for the consent form. His hands shook as he signed. Emily leaned over the bed and kissed Margaret's forehead. Mom, we're right here. You're not alone. Margaret closed her eyes, whispering, please, just don't let me die. And with that, the team prepared her for surgery. The operating room fell into a focused, heavy silence as Margaret lay unconscious under the sterile lights. Her swollen arm was disinfected and draped, revealing only the inflamed area. Dr. Harris instructed the team, stay steady. The pocket is close to the vein, we proceed slowly. He made a careful incision. Instantly the tissue beneath shifted. Not like fluid, not like infection, but like something reacting. One of the nurses inhaled sharply. Did you see that? Dr. Harris gently opened the pocket layer by layer. What emerged made everyone freeze. Inside her arm was a thin, translucent cocoon-like sac, tightly formed, its outer surface shimmering with a faint, unnatural pattern. It wasn't alive now, but it had clearly been forming over several days. The sac was attached to surrounding tissue with delicate, web-like strands, far more complex than anything a normal insect bite would create. Dr. Harris whispered, This is not typical toxin swelling. This structure is organized. Another nurse stared at the sac, voice shaking. Could an insect even create something like this inside a human? As Dr. Harris lifted the sac free, the base twitched slightly, causing a ripple across the membrane. Everyone froze again. The surgeon exhaled slowly. Whatever bit her delivered something far more advanced than venom. Outside, her family waited anxiously, unaware that Margaret's wound held a mystery none of them had imagined. Just as Dr. Harris lifted the cocoon-like sac from Margaret's arm, a faint crackle sounded, a tiny internal pop, almost like the membrane had released pressure from inside. Immediately, the monitors beside her bed began to beep erratically. Her heart rate is spiking, a nurse shouted. The sac twitched again, then released a thin, cloudy burst of trapped internal gas. No liquid, no blood, just a toxic puff of whatever had been forming inside. Within seconds, Margaret's blood pressure plummeted. She's crashing. Stabilize her now. Dr. Harris barked. Two nurses moved fast, adjusting 4 lines, pushing medications, increasing oxygen. Another nurse applied pressure near the incision, trying to control the internal swelling that began rising again now that the sac was removed. Her body jerked once on the table. Come on, Margaret, stay with us, Dr. Harris muttered, voice tight. Outside the OR, Rob, Michael, and Emily sat in the waiting area, exhausted, terrified. Suddenly, the double doors rattled with noise from inside. Alarms. Shouting. Fast footsteps. Emily covered her mouth. What's happening? Why are the alarms going off? Michael stood, fists clenched, heart pounding. Mom, please don't leave us. Rob closed his eyes, whispering the same prayer over and over. Inside, the team fought desperately to pull Margaret back from the edge. An hour later, the alarms finally quieted. The doors to the operating room opened, and Dr. Harris stepped out, removing his gloves with tired hands. His face showed the weight of what he'd just witnessed. Rob stood immediately. Doctor, is she alive? Dr. Harris nodded. She's stable. It was close, but she's stable. Emily burst into tears of relief. Michael swallowed hard, gripping the back of a chair to steady himself. You all deserve to know what happened, Dr. Harris continued gently. He held up a sealed container with the translucent cocoon-like sac inside. This wasn't a normal insect bite. Whatever bit Margaret injected a venom that reacts chemically inside human tissue. Rob frowned. Reacted how? The venom didn't just cause swelling, Dr. Harris explained. It mixed with the cheap ointment she used. That cream created a barrier. Instead of letting toxins drain outward, it trapped everything inside her arm. Emily's eyes widened. So, the sac grew because of the cream? Yes, he said. It created a layered shell. Think of it like an internal nest, formed by venom, tissue, and chemical reaction. Michael's voice broke. Could it have killed her? Dr. Harris sighed. If you had waited even a few hours longer, the toxins would have hit her bloodstream. The room fell silent. Margaret had survived, but only just. Several hours later, Margaret slowly opened her eyes in the soft light of the recovery room. Her arm was wrapped carefully, resting on pillows, and the deep pulsing pain was finally gone. She blinked a few times, disoriented, until familiar faces came into focus. Rob sat beside her, still holding her hand like he had never let go. His eyes shimmered with relief. "Hey, you're back," he whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. Emily leaned forward, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Mom, you scared us so much." Michael stood at the end of the bed, trying hard to stay composed, but his voice cracked. "You could have died. Please don't hide things from us again. We're your family." Margaret took a trembling breath. "I'm so sorry. I thought it was just a bite. I didn't want to bother any of you. I never imagined." Her voice broke as guilt washed over her. Rob leaned closer. "You're never a burden. Not to me. Not to any of us." Emily nodded fiercely. "We love you, Mom. We just want you safe." Margaret squeezed their hands weakly, tears filling her eyes. "I love you all so much." For the first time in days, she felt safe, surrounded by the people she should have trusted from the beginning. 2 weeks later, Margaret stood inside the community room of the local Cleveland Senior Center, her arms still bandaged but healing well. Folding chairs filled the space, and a small group of older women sat quietly, waiting to hear her speak. Emily stood beside her, offering a reassuring nod. "Mom, you can do this. They need to hear it." Margaret took a slow breath and faced the group. "I almost died because I ignored a simple insect bite," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I thought I was being strong, but I was really being careless with my own life." Several women leaned forward, listening intently. "I used a cheap cream because a neighbor said it would help. I hid the swelling from my family because I didn't want to bother them." Her eyes glistened. "I know many of you are the same. We tell ourselves, it's nothing. It will go away. But sometimes it doesn't." A woman in the front row wiped a tear. Margaret continued, "Please, if something feels wrong, if something keeps getting worse, don't hide it. Don't be embarrassed. And don't try risky home remedies. Ask for help. Your life is worth more than your pride." Emily placed a hand on her mother's shoulder, proud. The room was silent, but every face showed understanding. Within a week, Margaret's story spread far beyond the senior center. One of the attendees had quietly recorded part of her speech and shared it in a local Cleveland community group. The post unexpectedly went viral. A local news channel contacted the family for an interview, and Michael stepped forward to handle the communication. "My mother wants people to stay safe," he told the reporter. "That's all this is about." The story aired that same evening, highlighting the dangers of ignoring worsening symptoms and the risks of unregulated miracle creams. Viewers were shocked when the segment showed the sealed container holding the translucent sac removed during surgery. The next day, the brand of cream Margaret had used was flagged for investigation. The FDA announced they were reviewing several batches after receiving multiple complaints from seniors across Ohio. Community clinics began offering free checkups for skin reactions in older adults. Hundreds attended. Emily received messages from strangers saying Margaret's courage made them schedule medical appointments they had been delaying for months. Rob kept every newspaper clipping, quietly proud. "She didn't just survive," he whispered as he taped another article into a folder. "She helped others survive too." And just like that, Margaret's near tragedy became a warning that protected countless others.